everyone, and welcome to another PGMMV tutorial. Today's video we're going to go over how to make a top-down shooter, and more specifically we'll have a crosshair that follows the mouse, and then the player will be looking at the crosshair and it will be able to rotate in 360 degrees. So this is going to be a little bit, we're going to go step by step, resources, animations, everything. So let's get started. Alright, so here we are in a new game project. I'm going to call this top-down shooter tutorial. I'm going to make a blank project for this. I'm going to go next. I'm going to choose top down. Click next here. I'm going to use 48 by 48 are the assets I'm using. We're going to go with a 16:9, so a 1280 by 720, and we're going to hit OK. All right, so the way the workflow goes is we do our resources first. So resource tab, add image, and I've got these all in here. Wall tiles right here. All right, so there's our wall tiles for our tile set. Then we will add our player asset right here. And then we'll add the crosshair, which I think I got it from here. Here we go. I'll just use this one. Now you'll notice the crosshair is really big compared to the player, so we're going to do some scaling in the animations and all that good stuff. And I think that's all I need for now. Oh, and the bullet. So we'll go out to here, and here's the bullet. Okay, so we have imported our resources. Let's now go to animations, and let's start making animations for these resources. So I'm going to call this player. I'm going to register the player, this one. I'll hit OK on this. I'm going to center this, and I'm just going to call this idle. This will be the only one that I do. Obviously you will add more, or actually I'll name this 360 because this one's going to be 360 degree rotation. And how we do 360 degree rotation is we need to auto rotate it and auto rotate. So with that selected, but the one thing that we need to worry about is that it's facing right. And for auto rotate to work by default, we need it to face down. So we're going to go to the frame here. Oh yeah, I'm going to delete all of these. I'm not going to bother with restrictions, so if you needed detection on your game, you would add that specifically. So we're going to come down here, we're going to rotate this frame, but before we rotate, you see how it's rotating based off the center here. So I'm going to zero this back out, and we're going to adjust the center. And this is so we can get a more accurate rotation. Right, and now we will rotate it 90 degrees. And there we go. That should be set up. Now our 360 rotate will work. And this should be good. I'm also going to scale this. I think I'll scale it 200% there. And that should be it for now as far as getting it up and running. The next thing I'm going to add for now is just going to be the crosshair, because we'll get some things figured out before others. So the crosshair, and I think it was this one. Yeah, must have been this one. We'll hit OK. So crosshair. This is just going to be a single. It's not going to rotate or anything. You could have an animation to it. I do want this centered. So now the origin is centered. And I'm going to remove all of these. All right. Now we do need to put the center. I'm just going to move the center to the origin as well. And so if I did 150, nope, 155 maybe, 155, there we go, 155, and there we go. Now this is way too big. So I'm going to scale it down about 15% each. And we'll just try that and see how that looks. And that's all we should need for the crosshair and the player. So now let's get the crosshair in the scene as an object. So we're going to go to the Objects tab, add an object. I'm going to call this the crosshair. Sometimes my naming is not consistent, but oh well. And crosshair. Now, I'm going to leave it player group right now, but we're actually going to come back and change it. We're not going to allow any kind of detections or anything. I'm going to hit OK. And real quick, we do need to change the group. So we're going to go to settings and group management, and we're going to add a custom group, and this is just going to be called Crosshair, or however you want to say. And this group will only ever be associated with the crosshair, and that is for shooting purposes for the bullet. So we're going to come back into this object settings, and we're going to change it to the crosshair group. So we now have a crosshair that belongs to the crosshair group, and we're just going to say move to mouse, and this is going to be a loop. There's probably a script you can do where it could just be in this one action. I think it'd be a lot better, and I'll figure it out. I generally know how to do it, but it will have to come at a later time. For now, we'll just use visual scripting. Move to mouse loop back. This is going to be unchangeable, so we're constantly going to be doing this loop. And the loop we're going to be doing is we're going to be changing the variable, and specifically, we're going to be setting this object's x coordinate to equal the common mouse x coordinate. Okay, so this object's x coordinate is going to equal the common folder's mouse x coordinate, because that's where the mouse x coordinate is stored in the common. But we can't just do the x, we also need to duplicate it and choose the y coordinate needs to equal the mouse y coordinate. And so now that we have the first loop, we need to do it again on the loop back. Now this should work as intended, but first let's create a scene. And before we create a scene, let's create a tile set. So I'm going to just say tiles, and we're going to do the wall tiles that we have. Going to hit OK. Now we're going to go to our scene, and we're going to add a scene. And I'm just going to call this sandbox, why not? And we're going to have it be the tiles, and we'll hit OK. All right, so now I get some tiles to work with. I will go ahead and choose these, dump them into the scene, and then I'll add a few of these just so that we can know that we're moving around, kind of a thing. All right, so now we can add the crosshair object in here, just anywhere, and we can hit playtest, and we'll see that it is now following the mouse. But we still see the mouse, and we don't want that. So we're going to go to settings, project settings. We're going to turn the mouse display pointer off. And so now when we playtest, all we see is the mouse crosshair, and it's looking pretty smooth. Okay, so the crosshair is done. Now let's start on the player. So we're going to add another object here. We'll just call this the player parent. And we're going to select from the player here. And we do want it the player group because we want it to be the controllable player. So this will be the only the movement part of this. And eventually you will want it to have all your detections and stuff like that as well. So we'll hit OK. Now in this object, we actually don't need anything. And this can be idle, null, however you want to say it, does nothing. We'll just say that. Or actually more specifically, movement only. Now the only thing that we have to adjust here is a few things for now. The first thing is just the movement, and what we want is we want to adjust the speed. So I'm just going to give it a speed of 5 and 5 on the horizontal vertical, and I'm also going to auto adjust diagonal. And let's just see how that handles. Let's go to scene here, and let's plop in this object. I'm going to hit OK there, and now I'm going to move with the arrow keys, and you can see that it is moving according to the input. It's moving in really hard 8-directional movement, but that auto rotate is working. It is rotating it based on the direction, and that's pretty nice. And that's a good speed. So yeah, we'll keep it like that. All right, so before we continue, I just want to show you what the problem is. Let's actually go back into playtest here. And the problem is that we want this to face the mouse, right? So for right here, we want it to face this way. For right here, we want it to face this way, and in all 360 degrees. But the problem is that if we just have this one object and we're putting all our actions in here, to be able to keep adjusting to look towards the mouse, it's not going to be possible. You would have to have so many action nodes leaving your other various actions that you have, and even then it still probably wouldn't work. So what we have to do is we have to separate the player object into separate objects that do specific things. So that's why I said that this one is movement only, because that's literally all it's going to do, is it's just going to move for you. So with that said, let's actually just name it that. Movement only. That way I just visually it's clear. So what we need to do is, since this one's going to be the movement, we need to add a child, and we need that child to do something else. So we're going to add a child. I'm just going to call this the player child. And this one is actually going to be everything else. Now there's a couple ways to set this up. I might show both ways. I probably will, but this way is just the 2-object way. And so it's a little easier to set up. It's more compact, easier to understand. So we'll say this one's everything else. We're going to give it the same animations, because this one is actually going to be the animations. You'll see what I mean here in a minute. We're going to say that it is the player group. That's fine, but we are not going to give it controlled by input. And this one will be the attack detection and even the wall detection and stuff like that. Or, sorry, the attack detection. The wall detection would need to be associated with the movement. But you could technically keep these both the same, and it would be fine. So we'll just leave it like that. And I give that little underscore just to represent that it's a child. It's just a naming thing that I do. And so now we need to have this player, or sorry, this child here that does everything else. We'll have it do something here in a minute, but first off, we need to connect this child. And so how you do that is we'll go to the parent, we'll go to the cogwheel, and we'll go to connect object. We'll hit OK, and this tab will pop open. So when we click on it, we can add a new object, and we're just going to say this is the player child. Everything else, just to be very clear. And we'll select that object to be the child. And then we don't have to do anything else. We just have to make sure that this is a child, so that we can get the stick to parent property. And with this setup, we can now come to the player child. We can go to the parent-child relationship tab here. And this is what I meant by the stick to parent. We want the child object movement to be stick to parent. But the other thing is that we want this to be a separate object for everything else. So we're going to say we want it to have its own self HP. Well, actually, this you could probably do multiple ways. The biggest thing that you can't do is the direction. You need to take off direction completely. And so I'm actually going to take off all of these, and I'm going to say don't detect attacks on the parent. So with these all gone, specifically remember direction, we can now have a object that is separate from the parent as far as direction goes, okay? But it's still stuck to the parent, so it can't move. And so we can visualize this by first going to the player, and we need to remove the sprite from it. Or actually, sorry about that. We need to keep it here, but we need a different animation for it. That's right. We need to go to the player. We need to copy paste this idle, and we're going to say idle transparent. And the point of this motion is so that we can keep having a direction but not be showing anything in the frame. And how we're going to do that is we're going to take the frame and we're going to adjust the opacity all the way down. So this is going to allow us to keep a direction value, because if you did not set, so if we go to objects here and the player parent, if we did not set, it's only going to give one direction value for forever. And I think it's down by default, or maybe up. But so if you try to run a check, you'll never be able to get a value from it. So by having this idle transparent, we get that no visual of it, but we can now still keep running checks. So it'll help you on later in your project is basically what we're setting it up for. And so now that we have set the connections, we have changed the sprite for it, and the player object is set up, or sorry, the child object is set up, we can now test this out and see how it looks. And so we're moving around, and you can see that it's working as intended. So you can see that the child is not taking the direction that the parent is, and the child is sticking to the parent, so it is following the parent's exact movements, but it is not taking its direction. And that's a good thing because we want to control the direction. And that way you could be moving left, but facing right. And how we're going to do that is we're going to bring this state up here, and we're going to call this initialize movement. Again, there's a couple ways to do this. This is the more compact way where you initialize the movement in this child. And then I'm going to copy this and put idle. So this would be, again, if we look at this object, it says everything else. So this is the object where you would have all your states that you normally have in your game. But the first thing it's got to do is it's got to look towards the crosshair. So how we're going to do that is on page 1 with move template settings, or template move settings. And we're going to say we want it to move towards the nearby object. And in 1.4 or 1.05 up, we can now choose different groups. So we're going to choose the crosshair group. That's going to allow us to constantly try to move towards the crosshair. And we're going to hit OK. So it's going to turn on move template settings, and once you turn it on, it won't turn off unless you tell it to. And then it's going to go straight down to idle. So this is the effect that it's going to get, just that simple addition. It's now going to look towards the mouse. And now we can move around, and it's still going to look towards the mouse. So if anyone is still confused what's going on, we have a parent object that is the moving object. And remember, it's invisible. We can't see it. We have the child object that is this sprite right here that we can see. Okay. And its property is that it is stuck to the parent. So that's why it's moving with the parent, because it is stuck to it. It can't move anything else. Movements, variable changes of x coordinates or anything like that will not take it away from the parent. So it's stuck to it. And then what we're doing though in that child object is we're saying, hey, move towards the crosshair, this right here. So it's trying to move towards the crosshair. That's why it's looking towards it. And since we have auto rotate on, it can go in degrees when it's rotating. All right, so that's kind of the logic of this, is that you're using the parent for movement, the child for the visual and the direction changing, and then in that same child you can also do everything else if that's how you'd like to do it. All right, so we have this object set up, and this is exactly how it would be. The only thing that you would probably want to add is, say, like a walk animation, and it would handle the same way. If you are pressing up, down, left, right, then you're going to go to walking, and it's going to do a walking motion, and it's not going to affect this movement in any way. So you can have any sort of actions, animations, branching off as you normally would, and it would work as intended. All right, so now before we move on, because again, this is, I'm going to say object folder. This will be player object 1. So this is the type 1 of the player object. Before we do that, let's get into bullets. Okay, let's do the bullet real quick. So we're going to go to animation. We're going to add bullet. We're going to choose the bullet. We're going to center it. And I'm just going to, again, remove this detection so that we can easily see it. I guess I'll cut it. Cut. All right. And that's really all we need. We do need to set this to auto rotate though. And that way when we fire it, it will rotate accordingly as well. And that's it. That's all we needed to do to set this up. Pretty easy. So now let's go and create a bullet. We will have it be of the bullet animation. And normally I would have another group for bullets, player projectiles, or player attacks, or something like that, something that's general for attacks. But I'm going to leave it in player group, and I do not recommend that. Matter of fact, I only recommend the parent and maybe the child to be of the player group. Okay. And actually both of them being player group is probably an okay thing. But yeah, the bullet, definitely not, because you don't want to get into situations where you're trying to move towards a player group and there's multiple player groups out there. You want it to only move towards the player. All right, and we will want all these attack settings, so I'm going to leave that. And normally on a bullet, you'll have a seek, and then you'll have a destroy. I'm not going to go into this, but you're going to have like a thing right here, and then you would destroy it in here. That's just how it's going to go. The only other thing that we need to set up is the movement, and typically you want them fairly fast. I find 15 by 15, it's decent, and I will adjust for diagonal speeds. Since you can shoot in like circles, you don't want some going faster than the others, but we'll see all that here in a minute. And that should be it for our bullet. Now we just have to associate it with an object. Now, again, this comes to which object are we doing everything in, and that's the child. So this is where we're going to add the bullet settings in the cogwheel. Click OK here, bullet settings. We're going to click on a bullet. It's just going to be the bullet, and we're going to shoot the bullet. And we're going to be able to do no limit, so we can have however many we want. Now, here's where we decide where the bullet goes. We want it to go towards the mouse object, right? The crosshair. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say shoot in specified direction, and we're going to say shoot at the selected on-screen object group. All right, and that group is going to be the crosshair. And that is it. That is how you say, I want this bullet to shoot towards the crosshair. It's the only setting you have to do. Now, the only thing left is to actually call it. So we're going to go to here. We're going to call this shoot. And we're just going to have a simple thing where when you press A, I guess, yeah. Or, sorry, A, we're actually going to have to make a new input for it. But the way back, I'm just going to have it wait a little bit. That way you don't have to, that way you can't like spam it like crazy. You can still spam it, but just not as crazy. All right, so the thing that we need to do is we need to associate the mouse click with a input. So let's go to settings and let's go to control key input here. Now you can see that by default we have all these keys that we can choose from. And we don't, we can change it like here, like for instance, I could say A that we did. I could also say, hey, this is going to be the mouse click. So I could say keyboard and I can click it. And now it's left click. So it's associated with the left click. And this is working for now. So I'll just leave it for now. So we'll hit OK here. And it should be able to play test, and it should be able to, oh, except forgot to call the bullet. So in shoot, we're going to add a fire bullet, and it's going to be the bullet. And we do not have a connection point for it right now. So let's just see exactly where it shoots from. So now if I click, you can see that it fires the bullet at the crosshair. It's a little slower than I want it. I want it a little faster, I think. And it's coming out from the center. You can see that it's coming out from basically his forehead or something. And so we need to change that. So we are going to add a connection point. So we're going to go to the player. And underneath the connection point, we're going to add a keyframe and bring that down to the barrel. And then I'm also going to rename this connection point just so that we know it's going to be the gun point. And in the object here, we're going to say fire from the gun point. So that's one of the fixes there. The other fix is that we wanted it to shoot a little faster. So I'm going to say, let's go 25 by 25, see how that looks. Also, the bullet, I want to scale it just a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. And since I didn't do the center, you can see that it is scaled wrong. So pretty important to always have the center where it's going to scale properly. All right, so 150 by 150, there we go. And now if we play test, the bullet's a lot bigger, it's a lot faster, and there it goes. Now, the other thing that I want to go over here too is that, for instance, WA or WADS is not set up for movement. Right now it's only the arrow keys. And I want the player to be able to have both options, not just have the arrow keys. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to settings and control key management here. And here's where we'll talk about setting up other keys, okay? So for instance, you can see the key name, and this is the names that you see when you're choosing what input to press. This is going to be the name that you see. All right, so we've seen these before. And right now, they're associated with the Xbox controller for direction pad, the PlayStation controller direction pad, and right now they're associated for the keyboard up, down, left, right arrows. And that's it. So there's no other space to say and this. So what we actually have to do is we have to come in here and we have to create another up and another down. So take a minute here. Another left and another right. And so what's happening here is now we have duplicated these keys, and it's going to sense whatever is in these keys. So this might as well be the same as this. So what we can do is come over here and add now the W for up. Going down, we can now add the S. Going right, we can now add A. And left, we can add A. And going right, we can add D. And so now we can do directional pad or WADS as far as movement goes, because these keys are the same. But we have ASD up here, so we're just going to remove these so that those don't conflict with anything. And that should be it. We can hit OK. We can play test. And now I'm able to use the WADS, and we can go and shoot towards the crosshair, and we're constantly looking at our crosshair. All right, so the last thing we're going to go over is the other method that you could do for your player object. And so I'm just going to go over real quick, because with this setup, this is all you need to get started. So if you're happy with this setup, then hope you enjoy the video. So yeah, what we're going to do is I'm going to grab both of these because it's roughly the same. We're just in one area we separate the logic a little bit. So I'm going to copy these objects and paste them out here, and then close that folder so that we're just kind of focusing on these objects now. Now this is going to be, I'm just going to leave these with 1 at the end, and that's just going to mean that they're the different object. So the parent 1, we're leaving exactly the same. We want it to do exactly what it's doing. With object 2, the first child, it's not going to be everything else this time. This one is going to be direction only. All right, so this one is only going to be direction. And what we're going to do, and I'm actually going to copy this one more time just so I have it. What we're going to do is we're going to delete these, and we're going to bring this down here, and we're just going to leave it like that, except for we are going to put the idle transparent on. And what this is going to do is this is going to be moving towards the crosshair. So this object will be the moving to crosshair. There we go. So movement to crosshair. And it's doing that by having the direction unchecked. That's basically the only thing we need to have that be happening. We can also remove the bullet setting here because this is not where we're going to be firing from. And yeah, that's all that this object is doing. It's moving to the crosshair, and it's doing it with an idle transparent animation that is getting the direction. So then what we're going to do is we're going to come down to here, and we're going to get this object, and I'm going to rename it just a little bit, and it's going to be the player child's child, and that's that's just so maybe you can understand it. And this one is going to be everything else. All right, and I'm going to remove that extra one at the end. We don't need that. All right. So this is the player child's child. Now we do not need the initialized movement because this child is not going to be getting the direction for the crosshair. What this child is going to be doing is in the parent-child relationship is it's going to be getting the direction from its parent, which is the direction only object. So that way we can separate the logic a little bit. We have the parent that is solely focused on movement, the child that is solely focused on getting the direction, and then the child's child, which is getting the direction from the parent, but it's still stuck to the parent. Okay, hope that makes sense. But now we can just have this logic, now we can just have this object be the player logic, the idle and shoot. But the only thing that we have to do left is we need to come to this player child, and we need to add, I'll remove bullet settings, but I need to add connect object now, because now we're connecting an object to it. And so I'll add, and I'll just say the player's child, child's child, everything else. And I'll give it this one. And I'll make it a child, and that's all I have to do. If I was to go to scenes and delete this player and put in this new parent child that we have, and I hit playtest, you'll see that it does the exact same thing. The only thing that we did was we separated the logic into different objects, and that might just be for ease of understanding what to do. For instance, in this action, you could have a, whoops, where'd that go? You could have an action for like stop movement, and that way you could just have a link, and it would just be like a one-way thing to stop the movement, which to stop the movement, by the way, you would add a move template setting and you would say stop, and that would stop all movements for this object. And what I mean by all movement is it's going to stop the direction seeking, because remember, it's actually not moving, it's only trying to move, and that's how it's getting the direction. So if you wanted to pause it, it would just be in this simple object that you did it. Otherwise, with the method, the first method that we did, you would have to have a way of stopping the direction seeking inside this object, which could be a little more complicated. All right, so with that, I'll just add a folder here, and I will say player object 2. We can now add all of these in here, and now we have two different ways of doing the same mechanic and of moving around, top direction, shooting towards crosshair, and looking in 360-degree direction. And I'll polish this demo up, upload it on itch, be free for you guys, and hopefully learn something. Any questions, drop them by in the comments or the Discord channel, and we'll go from there. We'll see you at the next video.